Quite a marathon summit that was, nearly the longest in the history of the European Union. Just tell us exactly what was ultimately agreed on.
Well, ultimately, a big package of money, including money specifically for the coronavirus recovery response, as well as the EU's overall budget for the next 7 years, starting in January. So, Angela Merkel was underlining these are unprecedented times. Just a reminder, 135,000 people have died of COVID-19 in the EU. The economies are taking hits already, and they're going to continue that for several months. So, just to break down how they're hoping to kind of throw some money at that, the coronavirus recovery plan itself is worth 750 billion euros. That's for 27 member states. Now, that money is going to be raised by the European Commission by borrowing on the international money markets as if the entire EU were one country, meaning that there's the wealth of the entire EU as security. Obviously, this means that a country like Italy, that generally has higher borrowing costs than one like Germany, will be borrowing at the same cost. So it's a way of helping out those states. This is absolutely unprecedented on this scale. It's also unprecedented to borrow money in this way in order for at least some of it to be given away to the member states and never paid back. Just over half of this fund is going to be given out as grants, so 390 billion euros. The other 360 billion will be given out as loans, which will, of course, have to be paid back in due time. And to get a grant, the member states are going to have to hand over plans to the European Commission about how they want to spend the money. And it's not going to be just a free-for-all. There has to be 55% of the member states approve the plans, and they have to represent 65% of the EU population. It's a lot of numbers, but essentially it's what they call a qualified majority, and it's a way of trying to sort of safeguard that money and make sure it's not just sort of thrown around willy-nilly.
Again, just listening to some of the leaders after the deal had been struck, almost everyone seemed to be touting this as a massive victory for them and for their country. I mean, this idea that it was a win-win for everyone, does that ring true, do you think?
Well, I think there are wins in many quarters, but there are losses in many quarters as well. Pretty much everybody has wins and losses. I suppose it's a classic European compromise in a way. It will be interesting to see how it plays out domestically for each leader when they take it home to their own country. Here in Paris already today, there's been criticism in the National Assembly of France's part in this deal, the far left and the far right criticising the plan, for example, saying that it will leave farmers less well off with their EU subsidies. People really picking up on details that are really specifically interesting to specific member states. So Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel, though, trying to tout the fact that, look, they jointly managed to get the other 25 member states around this big deal in a pretty short time, just 2 months. Both of them, though, they have to admit, have not managed something they really wanted, getting rid of the budget rebates, which were started by the United Kingdom under Margaret Thatcher. France and Germany had wanted to get rid of every country's rebates after Brexit, say, look, let's start things off on a new foot. But actually, 4 countries that were most opposed to the joint borrowing plan, the so-called Frugal Four, they've all had increases in their rebates, from 22% increase for the Netherlands to 138% increase for Austria, more than doubling its rebate. So those countries' leaders are going to take that idea home as a consolation to domestic critics who were very strongly opposed to the joint borrowing idea. The Dutch Prime Minister, he was really particularly strongly fighting all of this. He's going to be fighting an election at some point before March of next year. Be interesting to see how much this will end up being an election issue. And just on a couple of other win-loss situations. There was an issue of trying to put conditions on EU money. For example, if a state is alleged not to be respecting rule of law commitments. So currently there are proceedings against Hungary and Poland over this. Now, France, for example, had wanted there to be this conditionality on the EU funds being handed over, but this proposal was watered down in the end. It could be blocked. A country could be blocked, from getting EU money if there's a qualified majority, again, in favour of that. So we have the leaders of Poland and Hungary going home saying, this is a victory for us. They'd been wanting to block our EU funding, but we've managed to stand in the way of that. So you can see it's a real kind of balancing act, a classic EU compromise, as I said.
Amazing, isn't it, to get 27 people to agree on anything,
Quite.
and for so many of them to go back to their countries feeling like they've really won something.
Exactly, and so many sleepless nights in the process.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much indeed for sharing that with us. Our European Affairs editor, Catherine Nicholson.